Hello, I'm Michelle Lepe. You might know me as Nina from The Goodnight Show on Sprout. You're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it!
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Since July of 2021, Jake and his friends have interviewed professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and many more. Who will they be chatting with in this week's interview? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Happy to be here with us. Thank you for joining. I'm your host, Jake Deffinbaugh. With you as always, our co-host Chris Bixby and Matt Bingel. How you guys doing?
Doing
So
good.
good. Hello, everybody. How you doing, Jakey?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you for asking. What do we have for today?
Glad you asked. Today's guest is a writer and composer. He's best known for his work on Sprout, including the Chica Show and the Goodnight Show. He was also the showrunner and executive producer for the TV series My Babysitter is a Vampire, based on the television movie. But going back a bit further, he wrote the 1997 movie An American Werewolf in Paris, which is a sequel to John Landis's 1981 film An American Werewolf in London. Great movie, by the way. Go check it out. And he wrote on one of Jim Henson's last projects when he was alive, the Jim Henson Hour, particularly the 1 hour special Dog City, which eventually became a show of its own in 1992. Please welcome Tim Burns. Tim, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to see you guys.
Yeah, of course.
Great to see you
Likewise.
too. It's a pleasure.
Happy to have you here.
Likewise. So I kind of introduced you a little bit, but for those who don't know, would you care to introduce yourself a little bit and what you do?
I'm Tim Burns, and I'm a Canadian weirdo. I think that's really all you need to know. I've been writing weird comedy and weird music since my 20s, and I started out writing sketch comedy. Well, before that, I was a drummer in a punk band, but I started out writing sketch comedy while writing catalogs by day, and then that led me to somebody who needed a Canadian for the Jim Henson Hour when that came to Canada to shoot. So I got that gig as the young Canadian nobody on the Jim Henson Hour, and that spurred on to meeting all these wonderful people from the Henson organization and the Muppet world, and that led to most of what followed in my career, everything from Freaked. You did mention the amazing weird cult movie Freaked that I co-wrote with Tom Stern and Tom Stern, who I met because we both auditioned for the Jim Henson Hour, and then went on to make things like Babysitter Vampire and got into the whole horror subculture thing, wrote American Werewolf with Tom Stern for that. And then also, because I was a musician and a punk drummer, I started doing comedy songs, and that turned into kid songs, and my wife writes kids shows. And I'll tell you the whole story, but I'll let you guys ask questions. Short version is I'm a Canadian weirdo.
Right into the point. I like it.
Yes. So what was your background like, and how did you grow up?
I grew up in Ottawa, capital city of Canada, and pretty straight ahead stuff. But my mom was a singer, and so that was mostly my musical side came from that. And my dad was just really funny, self-educated, witty guy, and he was a salesman and worked selling plywood and lumber. And music and comedy kind of were my twin parents ever since. And I was always the guy. I always tell people I got elected grade 5 class president on the platform that I would write a story a day, because I used to write comedy stories pretty thinly stolen from Mad Magazine, and I would read them aloud to class. And so you kind of know you're a writer when you're already hiring yourself out to write stories in grade 5. And then I was always writing comedy sketches for the Assembly and this and that. I just was obsessed with Monty Python and Second City and comedians and drummers. I was really into drums and comedy, and those pretty much are still the things that get me most excited.
Nice.
Awesome.
So what kind of got you into wanting to be a writer and composer?
Well, like I say, I think because of my parents one being the funny one and the other being the musical one. They're both kind of funny. Like they literally dragged me out of bed when I was a kid and say, "Oh, you got to see this comedian. He's really funny." I'd be bleary-eyed at 10 years old and watching Dom DeLuise or Jackie Mason or any of the old classic stand-ups. And
Of course, yeah.
I got in trouble in grade 4 for, we bring a record to the class party. I brought a George Carlin record to a grade class party. And it started with a whole piece about the word shit and how it's an important swear word for the middle class because it's not quite the F word and it's not quite. And the teacher at a Catholic separate school grade for that was very quickly yanked off. And he's like, I'm going to tell your parents, I'm going to tell your mother you brought this. And I was like, my mother gave it to me. So he didn't know what to do. And, that was just, and I was never that into sports or anything. I was kind of chubby and oddball, but I did have my small cluster of nerd friends that we liked the same weird comic books and the Batman show and that. And then even though I played drums in bands, I wasn't much of a musician in the fuller sense until I was in a comedy troupe when I moved to Toronto. I went to school in Toronto for radio and television, which was the closest I could get to showbiz after high school. And I knew there wasn't going to be much of a showbiz career in Ottawa, which is very much a government town. So I wanted to stay in Toronto and try and find a way to make a living in any way close to showbiz. And I got lucky that somebody saw me in the college comedy show where I'd written a lot of sketches at the college show and hired me to write for a new radio comedy show on CBC Radio. And while writing those shows, they would often say, "Oh, we want to do a parody of a blues song, or we want to do a parody of a like a Celine Dion ballad." And I was the only one in the group that had any kind of musical background. So I went out to a pawn shop and bought a $50 broken up guitar and learned basic blues chords. And next thing you know, I was getting into recording gear, and I had a studio gear at home. And then my wife bought me a piano when I was in my for my 30th birthday. And luckily there was a jazz piano teacher up the street, and I started getting into jazz and more fuller composing, and I just loved that whole world. So now I have like a full recording studio in my home and a lot of nice microphones, and I play drums and guitar and piano, and it took a while, but I think I'm as much or more of a musician now than I am a writer. They kind of ebb and flow. Sometimes I get annoyed with the whole writing business because, as I was telling somebody the other day, writing is like designing blueprints for buildings that often never get built. You spend a lot of your life in development and arguing about what a certain project should be or could be, and then you maybe spend 3-4 years on something that never sees the light of day. At least when you're a musician, I can write a song and produce it, and it's out the door and it's real, and no one can stop me from doing it. And that was what was so great about doing all the music for Sprout and doing the music for Playhouse Disney before that. It was go. It was like, hey, we need 3 songs for this show by the end of the week, and I would write them and sing them, and then they'd be out the door and they'd be on the air the next week. And that the fast turnaround and the sort of feedback of that was a nice antidote to the long and often slow process of writing and development and rewriting and funding and all that stuff.
Nice.
I have an interesting story.
Nice.
You mentioned Catholic schools. I've got a real interesting story. I think I've told Jake and Chris this. My uncles were a part of this band. They did sound and lighting for a band. It was an AC/DC tribute band. I think it was called High Voltage. This was, oh goodness, I want to say about maybe 1979, 1980, right around the time Highway to Hell was really popular. And I don't know what gave them this motive, but they, for some reason, I don't know why, they performed Highway to Hell at a church. I'm just sitting there hearing the story, like, how in the hell? Obviously, they're like, nah, you can't.
Why on
church? You can't play that here. That's what I was thinking. Like, first off, a rock band at a church. Actually, it sounds like a bad idea, but it's like specifically that song.
I'm singing Highway to Hell at a church.
Highway to Hell at a church. Like, what?
Well, because it's a badge of honor if you get away with it,
Yeah, right.
They key word there. If you get away with it.
Yeah.
Obviously they didn't, but it's just like, I mean,
Well, I had a good pal. His name was Eric. We kind of grew up as best pals in Ottawa, and we kind of got the job. It wasn't really. I think somehow we weaseled our way into writing morning announcements or doing comedy bits in morning announcement at a high school. But it was still a Catholic junior high, so the principal or vice principal would kind of. It was like my first experience with script notes, because he would kind of read over it and just cross stuff out. No, you're not going to say that. No, we're not letting you do that joke. And there was a lot of that's too insensitive for a Catholic school, and then especially for a kid raised on Mad Magazine. And then I still remember, I'm kind of proud of the fact that I did a drum solo in the grade 10 band that went on too long and made one of the nuns a little ill to her stomach. She had to be removed from the building because the incessant tribal drumming kind of upset her sensibilities. And I shouldn't feel good about that. But at the time I was like, yeah, I made a nun sick. So that's not on my resume, but this is an exclusive.
No. Similarly, I'll make this one quick. My mom actually went to a Catholic school. She graduated in 81, and they had a jukebox, and it wasn't her, but somebody. No, it wasn't that. The song that played was "Only the Good Die Young" by Billy Joel. And you can tell how that went. They banned all Billy Joel songs from the jukebox.
I don't know. I could get in trouble for what I'm thinking of several jokes now that even now I'm learning when to stop. I'm gonna stop right there. I just no.
Yeah.
More Catholic jokes. I love the Catholic Church. They're wonderful, fine people, except for the times when they aren't. Let's
right. Yes. Yes. But it's just like, man, like yeah. My dad went to a public school. My mom went to a.
It's all part of life's rich pageant, but
oh yeah.
I think I'm pretty proud of when I did Dog City for the Henson Hour, which was the first script I'd ever written longer than a 5-minute comedy sketch. But at the time, I was so excited to be on that show and in that room. I was maybe the least experienced person there, and I'm pretty sure I got hired. Me and Tom Stern, when we had the initial meetings in New York for everyone they were considering for the writing staff, there was about 10 or 12 of us, I think. Tom Stern was the only other guy in the room who was like a 20-something with no credits, and we kind of huddled in the corner and were terrified. And he was still mad that I got the gig, and I was a little like, geez, I don't know why they picked me over him, but I think it was because I was a Canadian. They probably needed a Canadian while shooting in Canada. But I would talk so much in the meetings, I would get so nervous and try and make jokes about everything and try and impress people that I got called into Jim's office pretty early. And I was pretty sure that Jim and Jerry Jewell, the head writer, were going to fire me because I was talking too much. And instead, Jim said, I got this idea about a dog gangster movie, and I thought you'd be good to write it because you're very funny in the meetings. And so I was like, oh, wow, I am going to get to write an actual full half hour. And then, oh my God, panic. I've never written a full half hour before. What do I do? And I just thought of every dog joke I could think of, and I strung them together into this rough shape of a story and handed in, I don't know, it was like 85 pages or something when it should have been like 30 pages. I just wrote everything. And then Jim called me into his office, and again I thought I was going to get fired, and instead he said, it's a little long, but I'm going to go to the network and see if we can get an hour and do an hour special. I was like, totally saved my life, and was totally another example of how awesome Jim Henson was. And then because I got to do that, the joke I was going to say is the sort of testing the boundaries. There's a joke where the sort of the gangster's mall kind of girl says, you're not so fancy, girl. I seen you doing tricks on street corners. Jump through a hoop for $0.25, catch a frisbee for $0.10, and that got in. And that's a hooker joke in a family dog show. So that's also on my resume, along with making nuns nauseous.
So,
Nice.
you mentioned writing for Playhouse Disney. What songs did you write for them?
Jeez. That was during the period I'd moved to LA. Tom Stern and I did another show. We did a very weird show you might want to look up on TBS called The Chimp Channel,
Hmm.
which was a half-hour comedy show, all live chimps. A very strange experience. And I was running that, and my wife, Bernice Vanderland, you might want to look her up. She writes a lot of preschool shows, and she's written a lot of shows for Sprout and Playhouse Disney. And another friend of ours, Lisa O'Brien, who's like one of my wife's best friends and is a Canadian, but she was with Disney and has been with Disney and Sprout from the beginning. So they both knew I was a musician, and they needed stuff when they were launching. I think it was Lisa and I think the exec's name was Andrew Beecham when they first started up Playhouse Disney. And they had this little morning character called Clay, who was sort of like the host.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they said, "Can you write just a little theme song for Clay?" So I grabbed my guitar and said, "Hey, it's Clay. Come on, let's play." And like, great. It was on the air the next day. I just thought it was a demo. I didn't even think, I just thought, is this the kind of thing you want? And next thing I know, it's on the air. And I was like, oh, geez. And then that just started the floodgates. They started calling me for, can you do these promos? I did a lot of promos. You know, Monday's a fun day at Playhouse Disney. Tuesday's a fun day. Playhouse Disney.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I did that, and I did a lot of stuff for them. And
So did you do like the music in their like coming up next spots? Did you do the music for those?
I did a lot of them. I don't think I did all of them, but I did quite a few.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
That's cool. Wow.
Had a hard drive full of that stuff, and then it was a lot of the same people that started Sprout, so I was on their list. So I ended up, getting the call to do the Sunny Side Up show, the Goodnight Show, the Preschool Musical on a Stick, the Chica Show. I did a lot of songs. I mean, even I forget how many, because I was still working as a writer and screenwriting and doing my day job writing. This was kind of stuff on the side to a certain degree, but there were certainly weeks where it took over my life, and it was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to get my script done because I'm up all night trying to play a guitar part to one of these Sprout songs. Because I'm not very good at any instrument other than drums. I'm kind of a medium level guitarist, piano, bass player, but I fake it well, and thank God for computers.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yes.
Since you mentioned Clay, we actually previously chatted with Debbie Derryberry, who actually the voice of Clay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was
Yeah,
Jimmy Neutron.
yeah, and I saw you did. You talked to Stacia and Michelle and a lot of the people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Worked
Yes, we did. They were wonderful.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the Let's Go show. I don't know if you guys know the Let's Go show.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
of course, yeah.
Yeah, I did the theme for that, and I did about 20 songs for that. There's some of my favorite
Yeah.
songs are from that show.
Wow.
For a while, I remember I was almost doing like a song a day. I had to write one a day pretty much, but
Oh my gosh.
there was, but a lot came out of that. And then I did like Norman Pickle Stripes came from the same place. I don't know if you saw that stop motion animated show. It's NBC Peacock, or forget what do they call that? That was a great series.
NBC. No.
Peacock.
No.
Is it? I'm blanking on it, but it just was
NBC for kids. Oh.
I think at the end of the day, I just realized I've got a good ear for catchy melodies. That's sort of my strength. And being a writer, I tend to be able to come up with, just sort of a hookier lyric or something that has a bit of fun to it. I usually try and make something a little bit funny or clever. So that's a good mix. And it doesn't hurt that often, like a lot of those shows, Chica Show and Sunny Side Up, my wife is working on them writing scripts, so I kind of have an insight to like who's this character, what kind of music are you looking for, how do you want it to be funky, do you want it to be folky, what's the level of fun involved, but it's a great outlet for me, that's for sure. I really I kind of needed that. I think I wouldn't say I was going to go crazy, I would have gone more crazy if I was not doing music as much as I did. And it's amazing to look back on it now and look how much stuff is out there that I forget doing. It's there's a lot of it.
Definitely. And since we
Yes.
since we kind of talked about how you got to Sprout, if you can remember, do you have any like favorite songs you got to write for Sprout?
Oh gosh. I'm more curious which ones you remember, if you guys remember any. But I
Oh
know
yeah.
there's a lot of the ones I like were for the Let's Go show.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
I
like
Safari So Goody, that's a
yeah,
good
as far
song
as like,
from
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Safari
Mm-hmm.
So Goody, I like that one a lot. There was one called To the Moon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Really liked. I think I liked it because of the lyric. Well, it's kind of a blues song, sort of a Leon
Mhm.
Redbone piano blues thing, and I like the on the moon there's way less gravity, so you weigh way less than on Earth, you see. And when we hit the sea of tranquility, we will float and float. And Milton and Ali, who sang those songs, they were great. They came to my studio here in just outside Toronto, in my basement studio, and we just had a blast. We kind of banged off 5 or 6 songs in a session. We had so many to get through, but they were really talented. It's often hard to
Wow.
find people who can act and sing and sort of combine them in a way, so they're still in character, but they're also nailing the notes and the phrasing and all that stuff, and they're masters at it. So that was really fun.
Definitely. Another song I
Oh
like,
yeah.
that was I can't remember what year it was, but it was during Halloween. There was a song you wrote called The Halloween Parade.
Oh yeah, the Halloween parade.
And
Yeah,
it showed like clips of kids in like different Halloween costumes.
yeah, yeah. And there was like a Thanksgiving song called "Kindness Counts" that was kind of almost like a gospel.
Yes, yes.
Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Kindness
Yeah, and
counts. That was a fun
and you,
one.
yes, and you also wrote the do the you.
Yeah, do the you. I do the me. You do the
Mhm.
you.
And another one is because we're gonna mention like different blocks and stuff, but one of my favorite theme blocks that I think you wrote was the Sprout Diner theme.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Come on.
Yes, Sprout Diner.
When it's not appetite. Yeah. Uh-huh.
You got to sing it to me because I forget. There's been a lot of songs, but
Oh,
That's a good one.
it was like, come on in, wait for a bite.
yeah, I
The
mean,
when it's time to take from appetite. Ooh, or something like that.
sounds like me. Yeah, yeah, I got it. Yeah, it's weird because again, I often think my mom was a real singer, and anytime I would open my mouth, even to sort of try and say that song that goes like this, she would just make this cringing face, like somebody was like stepping on a cat, and
Mhm.
and I was always pretty embarrassed about singing or hearing my own voice. So
Yeah.
it's kind of really
Yeah.
weird hearing my voice come out of the speakers on so many songs, and a lot of them sometimes I would do the guide track and then the actors would replace me. But there were quite a few of those promos and other songs that are me singing, and I don't like to auto tune too much because to me it
Right.
just sounds too robotic, and especially
Right. Yeah.
kids music, I want it to sound real and kind of handmade, and I don't want it to sound too processed and commercial. That was
Right.
I tried to use as much acoustic instruments and real things as possible,
Hmm.
so it wouldn't sound too slick. And I can't do slick anyway, so it works out.
And yeah, so well, Dino Stomp.
Oh, the Dino Stomp, yeah. Geez, I should have
Um,
a hard drive of all my. Yeah, I mean, I think also the theme song to the Good Night Show was one of my favorites too.
oh
The
yes.
ending theme. That's just really like
Oh
the way it
yes.
came out.
Hey, okay, yeah. Mhm. You have another fantastic day, but now it's time to say goodnight. Dun, dun, dun. We got ways to go, bubbles to blow, stories to share and
Used
to
to
grow.
yeah.
So good night, good night, good night. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
Yes.
Yes.
Melody. That's a good one.
Yes. Absolutely.
What
Definitely.
a
Yes.
what a great songs. During your time with Sprout, as you brought up earlier, you wrote and sang the theme songs for a number of their blocks. What was the process like getting to work with those?
It was pretty lonely and solitary. Just despite what you may think, I didn't even get to like meet a lot of the cast and stuff until much later, I think. If I'm remembering. But generally it was always a rush. There was always 3 or 4 things going on concurrently. And it would be like, we've got this new show coming up or this new block. Can you come up with something? And again, if I'm, you know, I was trying to find some of the tracks. I was thinking, oh, for you guys, I should load some stuff up on SoundCloud, and then you could like needle drop things if you'd forgotten. But then I realized I can't make sense of my hard drives now from that period, because there's like 9 remixes and 3 revisions, and the lyrics changed. And then I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to upload this stuff, but it's usually that process. I try and do a rough demo that's just guitar, and I don't want to spend too much time on it if they're going to go, no, that's the totally wrong area. It's always a tough question as a composer. I've found if you don't make the demo slick enough, they may reject it just because it sounds too bare bones. So you do have to put enough work into the rhythm track and the orchestration that at least it sounds like they get the idea this is going to be funky, or this is going to be folky, or whatever it is. But you don't want to waste 2 days recording all these tracks and background harmonies for something that they go, yeah, that's great, but we wanted something rock and roll and this is folk. You know, you don't want to be too off the map with it. So I have a lot of versions of all those songs, but I know generally it was about, for me, get the melody right and get the tempo right. You know, just get that. Is it doom dee doom dee, or is it doom? Are we driving? Are we? You know, what's the? Maybe that's just thinking like a drummer, but I just sort of think, what's the energy level of this going to be, and what's the hook? What's the little chorus? What's the little earworm part of it going to be that sticks with you? And if I've got that, it's often my first version is a night sight. I play a Disney time. You know, it's like that sort of mumbly thing. And believe it or not, I probably have versions of songs that are like that are just the blah 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 the night version. And then I fill in the blanks from there and spruce it up. And but I am a studio nerd. I think I grew up with a lot of bands like Queen and 10cc and ELO that had layers and layers of background vocals. And when you don't like your own voice, the solution is do 20 of you instead of one of you. That way you just sound like 20 mediocre singers in the background instead of one scary guy. So a lot of my stuff tends to have a lot of background vocals and harmonies and layers of stuff. And that turns out well, because it means you kind of write more into melodic stuff. You know, I can't do a blues solo. I can't knock you out with a Celine Dion diva performance. Nobody needs to hear that.
Right.
Yeah. And it's really cool that you also sang, of course, in Chica Show and other things, but you know, for you saying Brand New Day, Chica's Here. And
talk about the Sprout Diner theme song. Didn't you sing that as well?
Yeah, that's one from, I know I was in
LA. Because I can.
That was really early Sprout. That was like
I can hear that it was your voice too.
It's like, come on, is that one?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Because there was another one too that was I was just thinking it was kind of another. Oh yeah, it was called the do wash your hands, do wash your fingers, and in between soap and water. It was some kind of wash your hands song I had to come up with. I think that was the do wash song. It was almost like an old vocal group 50s kind of arrangement. I think the Sprout Diner I just wanted to do, I think because diner often makes you think retro, makes you think 50s 60s,
right?
So it had to be something that had a doo-wop kind of like a
swing kind of
swing
like
doo-wop. So not as rock and roll, but just that kind of later vocal group style like Manhattan Transfer used to do and stuff. And that is, I think, also growing up because of my mom being kind of a big band singer who around the house played a lot of the Ella Fitzgerald and Peggy Lee and Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra and that stuff. Unlike a lot of my contemporaries, you know, I was playing in a punk band doing Sex Pistols and Clash songs, but I knew all the Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra tunes as well. I mean, I was just familiar with that style, and I've always had a pretty big ear. I don't really like one kind of music. My collection is all over the map, and if it's got a good tune and an interesting beat, I'm a fan. So that pays off in a gig like this where you're doing doo-wop music one day and bluegrass the next, and then you know you might want to do something funky and Sly and the Family Stone, but then you got to do something Beatles-ish or you know old school. It's whatever works for the particular character or venue. But and I think again the Let's Go show and even the Chica's Costume Coop show or whatever that was, we there's a lot of fun songs in that for the
Oh, yeah,
Chica.
yeah.
I did
Yeah,
the theme to that as well, the Chica Show.
Yeah, Chica Show, yeah.
Which my wife was the head writer on that, I think, or co-created. And yeah, I got the gig because I'm sleeping with the producer literally half the time. No. But that's I swear, because my wife. It's my wife. I'm not. Don't worry. You don't have to cut that out for the Catholic school people.
So we talked a little bit briefly about Preschool Musical on a Stick, which you wrote the songs for that. What was that like?
That was a blast. That was a really cool show, and I think that's actually, I'll get maudlin now, but I think that might be my favorite song that I've written was in that show. And it was a sort of situation where I think everyone was trying to get to a party and again, this is a bit fuzzy in my memory what the setup was, but Banjo, I think, is waiting for her friend to get there, and the friend might not make it, and they're at the party. And so she sings this kind of sad song, If
That's
My
right,
Friend.
yeah.
And my mom had just passed away around the time that happened.
Oh.
So I was writing that song thinking about my mom and about if she were here. And it's one of my favorite melodies and chord. Like I think I would have impressed my piano teacher. I was always trying to impress my piano teacher when I was writing anything jazzy, because my piano, I got so lucky when my side story, I turned 30. I'd always been saying I wanted to learn piano. For like one day, about 2 weeks before my birthday, a delivery truck pulls up outside and a guy comes to the door, and my wife runs by me and says, "Get out." And I'm like, "What do you mean get out?" "Just get out." It's like, okay. Because the guy literally said the words, "Where do you want the," and then she like pushes me out of the way. So I get out, I come back in half an hour. There's a barricade in our living room with like a curtain over it and a bunch of boxes, and it says, "Do not open till your birthday."
Oh.
And I am sure, 100% sure, that it's exercise equipment. I'm sure that it's a running machine, because I've been saying I need to get in shape. I should get a running machine, a treadmill. And oh, darn, my poor, wonderful wife has believed me and bought me a running machine. And now I'm already planning how I'm going to look excited and thrilled to get a running machine on my 30th birthday. So, cut to my birthday, which just happens to be Halloween. Yeah. And I pull down the curtain, and it's not a rowing machine or a treadmill. It's a piano, a nice old upright piano. So hooray, I get to start to learn piano. And someone says, "Oh, there's a guy up the street teaches piano." And he's around the corner. I go meet this guy. Well, he's the head of the jazz department at York University. There's him and Oscar Peterson are the two jazz teachers at the time at York. And this guy is like world-class jazz aficionado that people come from all over to teach with him. And I'm just like beginner, show me the C scale. Anyway, that's where I took piano lessons for 10 years, was with this guy. I would go early just to eavesdrop on the guy ahead of me and the guy after me, just to pick up as much as I could. And he was to this day, I've never seen or heard of a guy who's just a better teacher, a guy who's just better at, so that anytime I would write a song and he taught me all this jazz stuff, I would just go, "Oh, Frank would be impressed that I went to this chord or this strange little inversion of that thing." And I would try and hide the clever stuff, the jazz stuff, in amongst the poppy stuff. And I'm still first level at a lot of that stuff. I'm not a real jazz player, but in that song, I think I was trying to write like an old school Sinatra's Ella Fitzgerald style jazz standard ballad about things not going your way, and you know, it all, that's still, I think that song still breaks me up every time I hear it, because it's just I the melody, everything about it that's the one I would put on my top 5 for sure. You know, you guys, I don't know, but yeah, for me, because of my mom and everything, it has a lot of significance. That's a long story for a short song, but there you go. The rest of the night, I'm trying to think what else was on there, but I think that's the one I remember most.
Well, the song at the end of it is really cool. There's nothing Better than being all together.
Yeah, there's nothing better than. Yeah, that was a fun one. That was kind of almost had a hip hop element to it. I think there was kind of a loop to it. Curtis was a great character. I like that. I forget the name of the actor that played Curtis, and he was always playing stand-up bass, or I always used stand-up bass for him. He had a low voice, and he was like the groovy dude at the back. And remember him having a good vibe in that song. There's again, that's it's such a fun venue to work in when you get to write for characters that say, okay, this one's going to be bluegrass and banjo. Of course, we got to do banjo music and this kind of thing. And then that character, we're going to use stand-up bass, and it'll be almost like hipster jazz, bebop speak. And you get to just fly around to all these different versions of permutations of music, which is my favorite thing to do, is to do 9 things at once.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Nice.
I'm trying to call up a hard drive to just give myself a list of all these songs so to see what I could remember. But you guys are doing a great job of running me through the paces of a lot of stuff I'd forgotten.
Thank you.
Even
Well,
I
thank
just
you.
found an old tape recently of the songs I wrote for Dog City. I think that was one of the first times I got away with writing songs. Was I wrote like, I think there's 3 or 4 songs in it. There's a song called Dog's Best Friend that is that one dog sings. It's a sort of like, I can take or leave retrievers, and it's all different breeds of dog with sort of puns and jokes on the dog styles that she sings in this sort of lounge song act. And at the time, I remember Jim Henson put me on the phone with the music supervisor for the Jim Henson Hour, who happened to be a famous record producer named Phil Ramone. And if you look up Phil Ramone, he's produced everybody from Paul McCartney and the Beatles and Paul Simon, just some of the biggest names in the business. I, at the time, did not know who he was. So, like an idiot, Jim just hands me the phone and says, "Oh, Phil wants to talk to you." And Phil is, Phil Ramone. So he hands me the phone, and Phil Ramone says, "Hey, how'd you write such great songs? They're really good. I think we're gonna do a good job on them." And I just said, "Oh, okay, thanks," and handed the phone back to Jim. And I think he thought I'd be really thrilled that Phil Ramone liked my songs, and I at the time had no idea who that was. So I was such an idiot. I just, "Oh yeah, good. I'm glad your friend Phil likes my songs." But, and then I think back at that later and going, "Oh my God, I talked to Phil Ramone." So, but again, I think the lucky thing was, as long as, and I think on that one, I was not good enough musically to handle the music, but it's sort of based on my ideas. And then this Oscar-winning guy named Rob Mounsey redid my songs and orchestrated them and stuff, but they used my lyrics. And again, I think that was just a chance to use my comedy writing chops, and I like silly rhymes and stuff. So yeah, I'm uniquely suited to this weird job, oddly enough. And it's weird seeing, guys like you that have grown up with this stuff, because I was in my 40s or whatever when I did it, and it's hard to imagine that the people who were watching that as kids are now you folks.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes.
I'm
So
old.
So you also wrote a number of songs for the Chica Show. What was that kind of show like for you?
Oh, it was a great show. I thought it was a really funny, wacky show. Again, my wife was head writer, I think, on it, and I think she's pretty funny. That's part of the reason I married her. But and we're both like big fans of both the classical Looney Tunes stuff and SpongeBob. We had, our daughter was
Yes.
I think our daughter was around 4 or 5 at the time of that, and in a lot of the songs, Let's Go Show stuff and the Chica Show song, you'll often hear our daughter. Anytime there's a kid's voice shouting something or singing something, it's probably our daughter Ruby, who I pressed into service. I'd say, "Can you come down the stairs and just shout 'Let's go' or something for me, for Daddy, for a few moments?" So anytime, I still haven't quizzed her about how traumatic that was, me forcing her to sing at random intervals, but at the time, I think she enjoyed it. And the Chica Show, I like the theme to the Chica Show a lot. I think that one worked well. It was really bouncy, and it really kind of suited the energy of the show.
If I the Chica Show. Yeah.
it's kind of, again, it's sort of big band Cab Calloway, but with a little more oompa 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 to it. I don't even know how I'd characterize that, but again, a lot of times you think of who the cast are, you think who the characters are and who's going to sing this and what works best for them, like the kind of person that can really, nail it. Stacia, I'm trying to remember who it was on that show. You guys probably know who was Chica. It was Forrest, wasn't it?
Forrest Harding, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Forrest Harding.
Forrest Harding.
And then the mom.
And the mom and the dad were Jen Barnhart and John Kennedy, and those two are
Both of
also
them are
previous guests.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
And they're pretty musical, and they could really handle, like, you could write pretty much anything, and they get it. Like like sometimes stuff that has trickier rhythms or syncopation throws people off if they're not musicians. But if you're lucky enough, like I was, to get people that have a musical theater background or can handle that stuff, then you can really get a lot more playful with the rhythms and stuff. So I think that show was just, it wasn't really a SpongeBob, but I think there's a lot of great songs in SpongeBob generally that I always, my daughter was a big SpongeBob fanatic, and now she's a marine biologist. So I think largely because of SpongeBob, and I think the silliness in those shows, the silliness in the songs, and the sort of just, you can go anywhere and have fun. I think that was always the operating principle for me, was, I want this show to be fun for a kid to sing, almost to the point of annoying the parents. You want to write something that the kid's going to sing so much the dad or mom will get like, that's enough of that song. So that's my operating principle. And earworms, it's got to be something that even I get. And it's tough when you're working on this stuff and you're playing it over and over again in the studio, and you're doing the overdubs and you're changing the harmonies, but then by the end of a day you've heard that song 150 times and you cannot sleep at night because it is just rolling. And a lot of those songs, I can remember some long nights where I just like, get that song out of my head. That means success. If it won't get out of your head, then you've done your job.
Yes, absolutely. And another song you actually wrote for the network. Do you remember the Nerdle Durdle?
Nerdle and Durdle. Yeah.
It's like a kind of like a brush your teeth type of like song, like that you use for the commercial.
Yeah, that's right. I can't, you'd have to play that one for me to remember it, but
like the only lyric that I can remember is there's one thing left to do, squishing around your best now to do, or something.
Okay.
Like that. Now we're done. So much fun, dun, 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 or something like that.
I'm loving this. I want to hear you guys do all my songs.
Sure.
Yeah.
The concert I want to attend. Music of Tim Burns, sung by the people that lived it.
That'd be cool, not gonna lie.
I mean, the weird thing is that around the same time as I was doing a lot of that, I was show running My Babysitter's a Vampire, which, I had written the TV movie, and then I was the showrunner on the series, which was a pretty full-time gig, putting those episodes together. And often I'd have to come home from a 12-hour day of shooting that, and then still write a Chica song or a Sprout song. And it was a bit of a tornado of, and then around 2013, I think it was, I had to have heart surgery because I always had a bad valve growing up, which was part of how I became a fat nerd. Was my mom, had been warned by the doctor, Tim has a funky heart, so that's why I write funky music. And so I find, like, life before and after heart surgery, which I had to have open heart surgery in 2013, then it all kind of gloms into a bit of a blur as I get older. It's like, right, that crazy period when it was like Babysitter, Vampire, and Chica Show and Preschool, like it was all just this big ball of stuff that I was going on 24/7, and the last year has been a lot quieter. I'm just sort of developing one show, and I'm my new ambition now is to write my own album. I've got a hard drive. The last time I checked, there was about 1,700 half-written songs on my hard drive.
Oh, wow.
That's a rough estimate, somewhere between 1,700 and 2,000. So I'm trying to just pick my favorites or play some for friends and pick my favorites and actually do an album of Tim Burns music. And part of my thinking was I'd like to do a night, at least one, because I'm not much of a performer. I do not like to get up in front of people and sing, or, drums. If I'm at the back, I love drumming, but I'm not a guy who wants to be in the spotlight with everyone looking at me. So again, I think that's why I like doing kids music, and people don't really notice who did it, but it's out there. But I always thought it'd be fun to do like this, a night where, okay, the first set is my best kids songs, and get a bunch of people in and perform them and do like some versions of my favorite kids songs I've written. And then the second half would be my my grown-up songs of even weirder stuff that's much more in the Frank Zappa and Harry Nilsson meets Frank Zappa in a dark alleyway kind of songs. But yeah, so you'd be warned. I'll be hitting you guys up to promote my weird album 5 years from now if I ever finish it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks for reminding me about
Absolutely.
Nerdle and Durdle. I gotta look all these up. You guys should do a playlist or something, and if you want, I'll send you MP3s. I've got all of them. So
all right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure. So moving on from your work composing for Sprout, you also wrote for other children's TV series, including Hello, Mrs. Cherrywinkle. Yes. Could you talk a little bit about those series? Hello, Mrs. Cherrywinkle.
know that
in
show at
particular?
all? Remember that show? Do you guys? Anybody? No, you don't. You're too young, I think, for that one.
I think it was a little bit before our time.
Before our time, yeah.
Well, I think it also mostly aired in Canada. I'm not sure where it aired.
Yeah,
over
yeah,
here.
it was on Canada, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, and again, that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
my
series.
wife's show. She created it, and
Oh, wow.
I was just cheap. It was like, Tim, can you write songs for this? Because she didn't have to pay me. This is when it was in development. She's not cheating on me. She did pay me eventually when it was on the air. But the star who played, it was kind of like this woman. I just had a kind of my wife grew up on a farm, a chicken farm, and Miss Cherrywinkle was kind of like just had a farm, a hangout, and it was kind of like the Chica Show in some ways. And she turned out, she was this great singer, Kathy Robinson. She was an American actress, I think. But she really had a Broadway style voice and could really belt. And so I wrote a theme song for it that was kind of bouncy country, but had a kind of like clap hands, barns, everybody come to the barn dance kind of thing. But then I got to write a bunch of songs for it that are also some of my favorites. There was the Rain Go Away, kind of a version of Rain Go Away. I don't know if you ever did that as a kid. You'd sing a little song to make the rain go away.
Mhm.
We did a version of that.
Back another day, yeah.
Yeah, we did a whole version that was almost like this big band conga. It was like the Rain Samba, and it was a really cool kind of Latin big band number that I really love. And then there was she had a flower that talked. It was like a talking flower named Murray the Gum Flower, and he was kind of like a wiseacre, kind of a smartass flower. It was a really fun character. And the actor that played him, Bob Stutt, I think, was a puppeteer who was really good, but he was not a singer. He was definitely not a musician. So anytime his stuff, that almost had to be like spoken word. And yet there was an episode where he had a crush on another flower, and I think the storyline was he was too insecure to talk to this pretty flower because he was just a common everyday, like a gum flower, I think was the kind of flower. Anyway, I wrote a song for him, I Am Beautiful, where this other character who was kind of like Miss Cherrywinkle's sidekick was Captain Dingy. And he was this guy, Johnny, I forget his last name. He was a good singer. And so he bolsters Murray the Gumflower's confidence with this song I Am Beautiful, like, hey, you know, you can do it. And that's one of my favorite songs. If you don't know, I'll try and send you that one. I Am Beautiful. It's a big self-motivational, you can do it, everybody's got their own thing. And then Murray gets all excited. And yeah, that's a sort of like a Broadway, almost like what's the Little Shop of Horrors. I think I was thinking.
Oh yeah,
And again, that's what I've always, you know, I never would have worked as a guy that wrote music for advertising or stuff where it was very much, you know, write this jingle for us and it must be this. The great thing about children's music is how open-ended it is, and that I could write 9 kinds of songs 9 different ways, and they could be funny or goofy or romantic and or dreamy. And you know, there's so many great, I grew up with all those great Disney songs from the pre-CGI Disney era, you know, things like Jungle Book and Pinocchio and real early classics that I was raised on. And that is some pretty deep, high level songwriting. The more you learn about songwriting and composing, the more you respect the depth of craftsmanship in that stuff. So I think I always hold those things up as my, you know, my targets. That's what I'm trying to do. I don't think I've ever gotten to that level, but it's definitely what inspires me, is to try and write something that could belong in that pantheon of classic songs.
Definitely.
Yeah. So check out I Am Beautiful if you can find it. I'll bombard you with crazy MP3s if you're not careful.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds like a plan to us.
And you gotta go in the movie Freaked, which 30 years ago was a very weird cult comedy with Keanu Reeves and Mr. T and Alex Winter and a lot of strange people. It's having this weird rebirth on the internet lately. I'm just getting bombarded on Facebook with freaked people who've discovered this movie lately, and it's like 20 years nobody ever mentioned this film, and in the last 2 years now there's like 1,500 people on Facebook that have a group.
I know, yeah, that's happened a lot with like kind of weird, obscure kind of projects that people didn't really know about when it was on, but all these years later now it's resurfacing and it has a huge following.
Yeah, and there's one song in there that I'm kind of proud of. It's a very short song. There's a sort of freak show in the middle of the movie where the different characters get up and do their performance for the audience, and there's a character named Sockhead, who is a guy who has a sock puppet for a head, voiced by Bobcat Goldthwait, and famous comedian. And he has his little song that he sings, is kind of a bell ringing song called the Wiener Schnitzel Polka, and he just sings, "We do the Wiener Schnitzel Polka because we like to eat fried veal, hey hey." That's all there is. That's also on the top of my resume, along with the Gershwin inspired love ballads.
Nice.
Every now and again I'd get a royalty for like 3 cents for the Wiener Schnitzel Polka, and I always want to frame those ones.
Nice. So I'm kind of curious, what's it like, getting to compose for the Your Kid Can Read DVD series?
Well, that was actually produced by Tom Stern, who directed Freaked. And I did another project with him. He also directed Kevin Hart's Guide to Black History, which was a Netflix special, and I did music for that. I got to do one of my favorite artists of all time is Aretha Franklin, and I got to do some Aretha style songs for that. And then the Your Kid Can Read thing was great. Tom, because he's known me for so long, since the Jim Henson days, knew that I had this kind of side career doing kids music. So he tapped me to write a bunch of educational songs about math or geometry or various things. And again, I had pretty free reign on that, to sort of, as long as it followed the curriculum and achieved the goals, he let me go musically in whatever direction I wanted to. And there's some pretty catchy songs on that. I'm trying to think of, there was a rhyming song that was really fun. I think it was like vowel sounds, like ow. I just had fun doing like ow, bow, foul, mow, and then boo, and just writing words with vowel sounds. Yeah, I'd be curious. Do you guys listen to current pop music, or do you know all this old music that I talk about, like Harry Nilsson and ELO and weird stuff? Do you know that?
Mostly older music for me. A
Kind of a
little bit of
mix for me.
current pop,
Yeah,
just a
for,
little
for
bit.
me,
But I'm mostly old school.
for me, kind of like middle. 'Cause I know
I just listen to
most
any
of
like
that era, and then most of that era too. So I'm like,
yeah. For me, it
you know,
doesn't. For me, it doesn't matter to me. Like, because sometimes I'll listen to classic music, sometimes modern, depending on
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah.
how I feel in the moment.
Hmm.
Because I think when you know the old stuff, if you hear a lot of my stuff, you can almost go, "Oh, Tim was listening to JJ Cale today, or Tim was listening to ELO today," or because a lot of times I've always been really fascinated with production too. The songwriting's half the challenge, and then production is the other half. About like, do you want this to sound like a Queen record, or do you want this to sound like a Beatles thing, or do you want this to sound like the Clash or Sly and the Family Stone, or every one of those things to me means, oh, it's going to be these kind of drum sounds, it's going to be this kind of electric guitar sound, it's got to be this kind of organ. And I totally geek out on that stuff, about trying to get the sounds that make different things, that give them their kind of flavor. It often is kind of like cooking, even though I can't cook, but it is that sense of there's a certain spice in that. Why is that guitar sound different than any other guitar I've heard, and how do I get things to sound like that? So I often I think a lot of the songs on Your Kid Can Read, I was really trying to nail a certain kind of pop song, and so a lot of them are very I would have to listen to go, okay, I can tell you which song this is trying to sound like. Not that I ever rip off. I'm very cognizant of, if I've numerous times gotten almost finished on a song and then realized, oh crap, that's the chorus to an old 10cc song, or that's way too close to this, John Lennon tune or something. So I'm very nervous about ever writing something that I realize later I ripped somebody off. But you can rip off their recipe. You can rip off their guitar sound or the way a beat sounds. I have a beat. I love Neil Diamond. Neil Diamond wrote a lot of songs for the Monkees, and the Monkees was a big show when I was growing up. And they had great writers for them. They had like Randy Newman and Neil Diamond and Harry Nilsson. And Neil Diamond always used this kind of just this kind of what I call ring-a-racka guitar pattern. So often for me, that's the germ of a seed that generates a song, is to think, okay, I want Neil Diamond to have written this song about geometric solids. What if Neil Diamond had to write a song about geometric solids, and you had the Bee Gees doing the background vocals, and you had Buddy Rich on drums? That would probably be a horrible song, but I would write it. I'd take a shot at it. So
Definitely. So you also got to write an episode for the Nickelodeon series Clarissa Explains It All. What was that show like?
Clarissa was a great experience. Right after the Jim Henson Hour finished, I think, did you guys talk to Mark Saltzman?
Yes.
yes,
Yes, we
Mhm.
did.
yes,
Yeah, Mark Saltzman
yes,
was one of the writers.
awesome.
Yeah, Mark was amazing, and he's a good musician. Anyway, Mark Saltzman was friends with Mitchell Kriegman.
Oh yes,
yeah,
also a previous guest. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, so
Queer
who
Bear
produced
and Clarissa.
Clarissa and had done Bear before that and used to work
Mhm.
Saturday Night Live. So that was my first job right out of Jim Henson Hour. Was Mitchell Kriegman was running a show in New York at the fledgling Comedy Channel when it first started up. And so I got hired to write for was the Rachel Sweet show at the Comedy Channel. And it was like a 3-hour daily block. I could go into long stories about the Comedy Show. That was like such a mess, but boy, I met so many people there in my fledgling. I think I was there for like 6 months living in New York. And I think HBO was paying me. I couldn't afford an apartment. HBO rented an apartment for me. They paid me $600 a week and rented me an apartment that cost $400 a week that they owned. So I was basically making $200 a week sleeping at the 98th Street Y. And and through that I got to meet Mitchell. So he knew I was a music nerd and comedy nerd. And when Mitchell went on to do Clarissa, first he hired me to do computer animation, because that was the other thing. I was really geeking on computer animation back in the 80s. And I did an MTV series called The Idiot Box with Tom Stern and Alex Winter before we did Freaked. And I created the first computer, long before there was AI, I created the first voiceover announcer of the future, which was this very crudely computer animated guy named Votar. And I used the computer generated voice of my Amiga computer to be the voice of Votar. And so based on that, when I was doing Comedy Channel, I did some fake video games for the host, and Mitchell liked those. So he hired me for Clarissa to do fake video games that often Clarissa would be playing on her computer. So me and another animator, because I'm not that great an animator, but I would have the idea and do the basic frames of it. We would do these fake video games for Clarissa that there's a bunch of them throughout the series. I've only recently been trying to revive my Amiga computer, which I still have in a box in the back room, to see if any of these things would still run. And when I turned on my Amiga 2000, there was a loud bang and a big spark and a lot of smelly toxic smoke, and I ran out of the room. And so I don't think I'll be reviving those animations anytime soon. But part of that was I got to write a Halloween episode for Clarissa, and Halloween being my birthday, I had a lot of fun. I think it was running about her crazy aunt comes over to stay and causes havoc, and it turns into a bit of a train wreck of a Halloween, which was loosely based on my own history with Halloween being my birthday and always having a bit of a split allegiance of wanting to enjoy my birthday, but also wanting to go out and get lots of free candy, but also trying to rush through my birthday dinner and have it still. I didn't want to move November 1st. I still wanted my birthday on my birthday, but
Right.
it's still an ongoing struggle.
It's just like having a birthday at Christmas, you know.
Yeah.
None of our
December
birthdays are
21st,
around
so.
Christmas.
Yeah, my daughter's December 21st, so it is always a bit of an overlap, but
Not too much, not as much, not as much as like say like the 23rd or 24th or
Yeah.
even the 25th. But
that's right. That's mathematically correct. I can't even begin to argue that.
no.
Those are closer to 25.
Yep. Yes, indeed. So you also got to write a little bit for Star Wars: The Clone Wars. What was writing that like?
Well, that was through a mutual friend of my wife and I, named Catherine Winder, who was a producer, and she was an animation producer at Lucasfilm. And she's good friends with Lisa O'Brien as well, who worked at Sprout and Playhouse Disney. So I guess through those people had met me when we lived in LA, and she was a Canadian living in LA. And I think at the time they were doing Clone Wars, and she was involved in it, and I guess George Lucas had said something to the effect that they wanted to maybe punch up some of the scripts and bring in a little more what he called swashbuckling humor to things. So she said, "Oh, I know just the guy for you," because when I first met Catherine and her husband, we were on a tour of LA. We were living in LA. And we went on this tour of sort of like wine country, and I was writing the movie for Babysitter Vampire at the time, and I was racking my brain trying to figure out the plot outline to the Babysitter Vampire movie. But I guess because she heard all my crazy ideas for that, she thought, oh, this guy's got some crazy ideas and might be good to add some swashbuckling, wildness to Clone Wars. So the big part of that for me was I got to meet, she said, George likes to meet people that are working on his stuff. So you get to meet George. You got to come to the Skywalker Ranch and meet George. And that was, I was shaking in my bones that I was going to meet George Lucas. And I've been lucky. I've met a few big wigs like Jim Henson and Frank Oz and a few other, Phil Ramone, who I didn't know was Phil Ramone, but I've had my brush celebrity over the years. But George Lucas, like, oh my God, what am I going to say to George Lucas? So what I remember most about that was that as I drove up there in the rental car and I'm trying to follow the directions to get to Skywalker Ranch, my iPod's on shuffle and it's playing any other song. And as I'm driving up the laneway to Skywalker Ranch, it gets to Phil Collins' "In the Air Tonight." And it's like the most imposing dun, 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 and it's just the opening part. And then when you kind of there's a buzzer or some security had to tell your name, and they okay, yes, the doors to the gates opened as the Phil Collins drum fill happened, like, and it just felt
my
out of body scripted moment. How can this really be happening to me? And I was almost too distracted to have the meeting because I was still going. It was just like the soundtrack to my life was happening in that moment. And George Lucas was very pleasant, and we had a nice meeting, and I asked him some of my geeky Star Wars questions, and he just was really easy to talk to. And I was amazed how he really didn't ask me about what I wanted to do on Clone Wars or anything about script writing. He just sort of seemed to, where are you from? Do you have a family? Do you have a kid? Yeah. What do you do? And how long you been in the business? And we just chatted, and then it was over, and I was back in the hallway going, well, that was it. But I didn't tell him my story ideas. And then he, I guess, said to my friend Catherine, yeah, he seems nice. Yeah, he seems funny. Okay. So I got to write one. And then when I wrote it, then it became a bit of a battle, because what I wrote, thinking that they want more of a swashbuckling thing, I wrote what I wanted. And then the showrunner, Dave, somebody, his name escapes me because I didn't meet him personally. I think he really, it was too funny for him. It was this is not our show. This is a little too gaggy. And he was probably right. But at the time I was like, hey, come on, I worked hard on all these jokes. But I think the part of the argument we had was he was like, a Jedi wouldn't say that. And because they're like strict monks. And my argument was, that's why most of the good Star Wars movies are about people trying to be Jedis, but not full Jedi, because no one wants to see an actual monk in a story. That's a boring guy who doesn't drink, doesn't romance, doesn't do anything but follows the rules and is a monk. You want to see a guy trying to be that, but struggling against his own, humanity and his own failings and flaws. And so that was, for me, where a source of the comedy would be Anakin Skywalker trying to follow the path, and it's young Anakin and trying to have some more impetuous youth come out of him. That I felt, the stuff that I saw was too serious. But I think that about everything because I'm a comedy writer. Everything seems too serious to me. I'm always poking fun at stuff. So
right.
Yeah, I don't think they were wrong. I think they were right. They took out most of the jokes I added, and it still was my story, but it was much more their tone than mine. But it was almost like I was there a bit as an experiment, I think, to say what would happen if we brought more of a looser feel to this. And they still used some of it. I think it was a looser episode than it would have been if I hadn't written it, but they definitely I think it was, my flavor was too comedy for that. I'm not a Star Wars guy. I'm much more a Spaceballs kind of guy. May the Schwartz be with you.
Great movie.
Yeah. Wonderful movie.
Spaceballs. Yes,
absolutely. Mel Brooks
great
growing up.
Yes.
Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles. Those were the movies
that
blew my mind when I was a teenager.
Absolutely.
Yep. Spaceballs is a really, really great movie. You also wrote for the Henson TV movie Jim Henson's Turkey Hollow, which memory serves me correctly, I think was originally going to be produced, I think, in the late 60s, I think, by Jerry
Yeah,
Joel.
I saw on Muppet Wiki. It was based on an old story by Jim Henson and Jerry Jewell, and then years later it was developed into something kind of different.
I like any chance to talk about Jerry Jewell. He was an amazing guy. He was my hero for many years. First head writer. I didn't really know what a head writer was until my first real gig on the Henson Hour.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so patient with me and nice and really explained stuff to me. Even as I was preparing for this and looking at some of the old Henson Hour footage, I have some behind the scenes footage of the Henson Hour, and there was footage of the Swedish Chef sketch I wrote, which was, I think, one of the first sketches I wrote for the Henson Hour. I had this idea that a cockroach gets into the chef's kitchen, and he's a French cockroach named Jacques Roach. and Jacques Roach is like a French chef. So when the Swedish chef wants to get the cockroach out of his kitchen, the Jacques Roach is. So Jerry liked that idea. He said, "Yeah, let's take a shot at that." But I go back to my office all excited that I'm going to write a sketch for the Henson Hour, or get that they've approved one of my sketches. And I realize it's the Swedish chef, who I love, is one of my favorite characters, but I don't know if you write what the Swedish chef says. Like, do I write that what he wants to say, like, "We're welcome to the show," or do I write the actual Swedish gibberish he says, like, "Welcome to the show"?
Right, yeah.
Sat there terrified, staring at my laptop for about an hour, too nervous and embarrassed to go ask anyone that question, because I seem like an idiot if I don't know how to write this sketch. Eventually, I go down to Jim and Jerry's office, and like a dope, I knock on the door, and I'm like, "Do I write what the Swedish chef is trying to say, or do I write what the Swedish chef says?" And Jim and Jerry both had a laugh at my expense, and Jerry laughed and deferred to Jim, and Jim said, "Oh, you just you write the gibberish and I'll say what you write." So then I went back to my computer and wrote "Vernie to hit the hoolie the bitch cockroachy" or whatever like that, and I couldn't believe it. He kind of delivered that verbatim with every syllable of weird gibberish that I'd written. It was unbelievable to me that he would memorize that. But like when we were doing Dog City and I didn't know what an act break was and I didn't know what a narrative thing was, I was just pounding jokes. So Jerry was the one who kind of guided me through, you gotta tie this plot together, and you gotta have an act break where things go this. He really taught me the ropes in a rush that first year. So to get to work on Turkey Hollow many years later, I really felt the pressure to try and do justice to the story, and try and bring as much of his original flavor to it, because he always had this uncanny ability to do kind of stuff that was almost edgy, but it still had the Muppet warmth and the family friendliness, but almost in the same way Bugs Bunny would have a bit of a elbow to the ribs Groucho Marx quality. Jerry was just, I think he's often the unheralded hero of the Muppets era. And I can't say enough about what a inspiration he was. And then the Turkey Hollow thing, it spent a long time in development, and we went through a lot of rewrites and a lot of changes, and I think funding fell through. It kind of was happening, and then it wasn't happening, and then it was back again. And I think it was Kirk Thatcher was directing, and I'd known Kirk since the Jim Henson Hour days, and Kirk's have you talked to Kirk? Have you done the Kirk interview yet? You got to get Kirk Thatcher in there, damn it, because he's a freaking institution.
Oh yeah, he
hilarious.
Wrote and directed just a ton for the Muppets, yeah.
And he's the punk on the bus in Star Trek. So, like, other than that, those two things alone make him a legend in anybody's book, if you ask me.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it was just a blast to get to work with Kirk again. And I think Alex Rockwell was involved as producer, and she was Jim's assistant back in the Henson Hour days, and we stayed friends after that. She was involved in the Norman Pickle Stripes show that I did all the music and theme for 10 years ago or whatever. So for me, it was mostly just a thrill to get to work, because at that point it had been like maybe 20 years since I'd worked with any of the Muppet people. So to kind of get to regroup with them was a real blast. And I think the final product turned out pretty fun. They're such a kind of unique company, the Henson Company. They do their best to kind of preserve the tone and the style of the classic Henson bits, and they're not Disney and they're not Warner. They have their own vibe, and it's a pretty lucky day when you get to work with them, because you're going to get to have fun and you're going to get to do your goofiest ideas, and they're very supportive, which is rare sometimes.
Yeah,
we had, I think, years after, just around when Jim passed, it was so abrupt and sad, and Jim seemed to really like what I did on Dog City, and they'd signed me to a development deal, and he had all these plans. We're going to use you to write this and that. And then he passed away abruptly with pneumonia. And so at first there was a bit of an odd silence, I think, across the whole Henson universe. And then they contacted me to work on this book called Borgle by a writer named Daniel Pinkwater. And we spent a year or two trying to develop this Borgle book into this sort of sci-fi Wizard of Oz type thing that was a really great story and really fun, but we could never quite find the right tone, and it could never quite, I think in that sort of post-Jim era, it was still there. They were changing gears and trying to figure out who they were and how it was going. And maybe I just wasn't the right writer for it, all I know. But I still look back at that as one of the projects that I really wanted to happen with the Muppets that didn't. But geez, I've got drawers and drawers full of stuff I spent years writing that will never see the light of day. But eventually in the Tim Burns Museum, these things will all come to light.
So can you share any memories from writing and producing for My Babysitter's a Vampire?
So many things. I mean, the show itself, I'm pretty proud of. There's some pretty great, I think, some really fun, solid episodes. The cast was really solid. Vanessa and Atticus and Matthew were, and Cam. I just saw Cameron Kennedy, who played Rory. I like the trio. I like the idea of a comedy trio. In general, you've got Smart. Ethan is kind of like again, having been a nerd myself in high school, I'm always drawn towards characters who aren't quarterback of the football team or that capable. I like the guy who's the lone, let's think this through, let's have a plan before we go marching in there with baseball bats to kill the monster. But if you've got that guy who overthinks things and is maybe a little too conscientious, is that the word I'm thinking of? Anyway, you got that guy. You need these sort of, while you're thinking that, I've already grabbed the bat and burst through the door and we're smashing in there. You need the guy that's the act first, think later guy, who's the comic foil, which is what his buddy Benny kind of was. And then the third guy is just the doofus, just the guy who's like 3 steps behind both of them, and they're both talking about the plan to beat the monster, and he's talking about sandwiches. There's just always got to be a guy who's still worried about what kind of sandwich he should have. And in my experience in the real world, there's usually that guy, and that's kind of a Spinal Tap vibe, or I don't know, I can think of any number of movies. And it was just fun writing for that kind of Marx Brothers trio of nerd, goof, and doofus, I would say. And then to do that in a vampire world, I always like things where you take the classic story that is a hero adventure story, and you pull out the hero and you plop in a weird nerd. So then it's a whole different story that's not a big battle scene. It's more just a weird, how do we not die? How do we get through this and try not to die? It's because you can be a little more real about you would be terrified when a vampire is chasing you and wants to drink your blood. And but we got, God, there was an evil car episode we did that was kind of like a Christine the Possessed Car sort of episode. And I remember doing that one, and we're shooting in Hamilton, Ontario at like 2:00 in the morning, and there's supposed to be ghost car coming. And I think the guy was like, we had like a stunt guy underneath the wheel, just blind driving the car with the monitor underneath. And I'm like, he's running in front of this car. Is that safe to have a kid running in front of a remote controlled car? If that guy's monitor goes out, we shouldn't be risking killing a teenager. Oh no, it's fine. The directors were always like fine with stuff that I was pretty sure was going to kill somebody, and we never did. I guess I shouldn't admit that on camera, but we did a lot of crazy stunts for that show.
Yeah.
And the other, I know my favorite line still to this day, and we had a great writing staff. I don't want to have to name all of them because I'll get mad. They'll get mad if I forget one, but sort of my right-hand man was a writer named Mike Kiss, who I just was kind of mini me. He was smarter than me and he wrote funnier jokes. So I kind of hated him for that. But I would often say, it's got to be a joke like this or a bit like this. And he would come back with something that was brilliant. And we did a kind of zombie episode where it turned out there was something in the coffee in the teacher's lounge, the employee lounge, that was turning all the teachers into zombies. And Benny at some point takes that coffee, and Ethan doesn't know it. And he's just still talking to Benny, not realizing that Benny's turning into a zombie. And he just has the line, like, he can't follow what Ethan's saying. He just says, look, can I bite your head? And can I bite your head is one of my favorite lines of dialogue that I've ever gotten away with. and maybe Mike wrote it or maybe I did, but that's a fine thing. But my biggest story on Babysitter Vampire is that we were strangely successful. It was the #1 show for a while on the Disney Channel, and we were in season 2, and we were doing very well in the ratings. And our executive producer said, I get a word now how much trouble I'll get in for this, but I've told people this story, maybe not on a recording, but the way I remember it is, he said, I don't want agents to come back for season 3 and ask for a big raise because we're #1. So I want you to write an ending. He's telling me at the beginning of season 2, write an ending where everyone maybe dies, So I went into the writing room and I just put the index card, just said boom on it on the board. That was where we started the season, was just a card that said boom. And we wrote the whole season to build up to, there was this like witches cabal with a high council of witches, and they had a headquarters in this old house, and everything would build to a meeting at the witches council where they would go in there, and then we'd cut to across the street and the house blows up. Big mystery. What happened? And our plan was, I can say now, that there was this portal that the witches had in their basement that led to the old country, to Transylvania, to the original home country of all the, we were going to do a TV movie set in Transylvania. Let's take the vampire show to Europe. And we were going to do a European movie, European vacation vampire style. Never in my wildest dreams did I think, while we're #1 on Disney Channel, we could get canceled. Did not imagine that to be possible. Lo and behold, we get canceled. And I'm like, how did we get canceled while we're #1? And apparently the answer to that was something to do with business stuff that I don't understand. That was basically, we're not a Disney show. We're a Canadian show. And Disney Channel doesn't want the #1 show on Disney Channel to be a Canadian show they don't own. That may not be true. That's the reasoning I was told. So the upshot of that is, business is business. That's fine. But I just still feel culpable to this day. And every now and again, I'll get some fan coming like, did they die? Did everyone die? Did the show, they go into a house, they die, the end? I'm the bastard that did that. I'm the guy that killed all the main characters in a show, the end. And I have to deal with that responsibility for the rest of my life. So just for the record, it's because I thought that we could never get canceled as the #1 show. And I was wrong. And that was a good life lesson for me. You can always get canceled.
I'm kind of curious. Do you keep in touch with any of the My Babysitter's vampire cast?
No, not really. It's a little too bad. I think I keep more in touch with the writers because, the writing room is upstairs and we're up there thinking of episodes 5, 6, and 7 while we're downstairs in the studio. They're shooting episode 1. And when you're showrunner, you're kind of running all day between the set and the back to the writer's room and back to the set. And so even though the cast sort of knows you, I think there's also that weird thing where I'm just like, they blame everything on me, not in a bad way, but they're like, oh, why are we doing this crazy scene? Or, oh my, this ending doesn't make sense. So Tim's got some crazy idea. They're teenagers thinking, what the heck's going on now in my day? And that guy over there, it's his fault that we're stuck in a car or we're stuck standing in the rain at 2:00 in the morning on some weird set. So we didn't really have that friendly a relationship, not unfriendly. We were never like, enemies or anything, but I think they just treat me as one of the suits. I'm one of the execs because of the age difference in that.
Right.
I remember Vanessa looking at my iPod during a filming and just going, you got a lot of weird old shit on your, like, she just couldn't believe the weird music I had on my iPod. So we didn't have a lot of things in common, I think, more than anything. And mostly I would joke around. I think Atticus Mitchell playing Benny was the most we got along the best, just because he liked to be a goof and trade wisecracks. And Matthew was a little more serious, so he would just kind of like trying to maintain his stamina. But I'm still friends. I just saw on Facebook that Cameron Kennedy, who played Rory, is engaged, and I think he's gonna have a kid. Or no, he's married.
Oh,
I hope I'm not in trouble for saying engaged. He's married and gonna have a kid. So I'm very excited for him, because I told him on Facebook, my own personal thing is like, as much as you think showbiz or whatever else, the best job, the best thing in my life is being a dad is the coolest. And I didn't expect that before I was a dad. It took my wife longer to have a kid. We didn't have our kid till we were 40, and best thing ever. So I'm going to tell you that that's your life advice. You know, you think stuff's fun. Wait till you have a kid, then shit gets real in various real ways. But no, it's so I'm very happy for him. And I know Mike Kiss worked on the Hardy Boys series, which I think Atticus was in. So I think they stayed friends. I haven't seen Matthew Knight show up on things. I don't know what he's up to. I know he'd been an actor since long before. He was like a kid actor. And I think when we were done, he was almost like tired of the game. I think he was like going to take a break from acting for a while. So I haven't seen him around on things. I hope he's doing well, though. He was a hell of just a super talented kid and a real hard worker.
Absolutely. You know? Definitely.
You've run through my entire resume.
Pretty much. You also worked on the 3rd season of Crank Yankers as a supervising writer.
Yes.
Could you kind of talk about your work on that show and what exactly a supervising writer is? I know you touched up on a head writer, but
yeah,
what exactly is a supervising writer?
It's not anything. I think that's just a sort of, it's kind of a mid-level credit, meaning you're not a junior writer. It's only just, I think, probably a pay bump or something, but it doesn't change your responsibilities or the job in any way. It just means not junior writer, and you probably get paid $50 more a week than the regular writer. But that was a really fun show to work on. Again, that was when I got my green card. I'd come back to Canada, and I had produced a show called Black Fly with a comedian named Ron James that was shot out in Halifax out east, and we had our daughter, and then we'd applied for a green card, and we got our green card. So you have 6 months after you get your green card to move to the States. You have to make use of it within 6 months, which was awkward because our daughter had just been born. So we wanted to wait to get her as old. We moved when she was 5 months old, I think, which was a tricky time to relocate to Los Angeles. And so now, having just moved to Los Angeles, I was looking for something to do. And Tom Stern had just started working as a director, or was working as a director on Crank Yankers since the beginning. He'd also worked on The Man Show with Jimmy Kimmel and was good friends with Jimmy. So that's why I got, I guess, called in, and they liked what I did. And so I got to write on the Crank Yankers show, which was a really unique writing experience, because the way they would do that, like, first off, for those that don't know, Crank Yankers is a prank phone call show, right? And you have you guys seen it? Do you know the show? It's puppets act out the audio from the prank phone calls.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, a lot of wonderful puppeteers on that show too.
Yes.
And the thing was, I used to do prank phone calls as a teenager and get in a lot of trouble for it. And I used to try and record them on my little cassette recorder. Just, one step up from, is your refrigerator running kind of crap. And so to be in a position where now I was getting paid to think up prank phone calls and actually do them was astonishing to me. And obviously they are real prank phone calls, so you can't really script them because they have to really happen. But what you do is you come up with the idea for a prank phone call. Like, I think we had this one idea that we did with Drew Carey about a guy who I think for a Christmas episode, we did a call where dad can't afford Christmas presents for his kids. So he wants to, we were calling reindeer farms to see if we could rent a dead reindeer that they could put on the lawn, so the dad can say, see, Santa had an accident and the reindeer died, and that's why there's no presents this Christmas. So that's the kind of dark stuff that's coming up. So you'd come up with a bunch of weird ideas like that, and some of them would get, yeah, let's go try that. And the technicality was you can't record phone calls in California. The show was done in LA. So we would have to drive to a studio in Las Vegas because Nevada is what they call a one-party consent state. That meant you're allowed to record phone calls without telling the other party you're recording them. So we would drive to this recording studio in Las Vegas, and the talent, like the guest star of that week, I did sessions with Eminem and with Drew Carey and Tony Barbieri, who played numerous characters on the show, an eccentric millionaire named Niles. We would do the calls with them, and you sit there in the studio. There'd usually be about 3 writers, and you'd have a whiteboard, and you're all in headphones listening to the call, and you call the reindeer farm, and you've written a few opening lines or possible things the guy might say and some possible responses, but it always very quickly takes some left turn into something you didn't expect. And then the sound of squeaking Sharpies on whiteboards as we all 3 writers try and write responses to whatever the guy on the phone is saying. And then the guest would look at the 3 possible responses you've written and pick something to say, so it was a real seat of your pants writing experience, trying to come up with jokes on the fly while the call's happening. And then a sort of competitive thing like, gee, I hope he picks my line. I hope it felt good if they picked your line, not the other 2 guys. And some really, really crazy calls and strange conversations that would happen. And then they cut them down to the 3-minute or 4-minute version that would end up on the show. So yeah, I mean, the other thing I should mention I did then during that was a show called Saul of the Mole Men. That was this really weird Adult Swim show that Tom Stern directed with another writer friend of ours, Josh Gardner, who would do music sometimes. And I wrote a theme for that called Saul of the Mole Men that Jimmy Kimmel's brother, John, sang. He's a really good singer, John. And so that's another part of my musical resume is the theme song from Saul of the Mole Men. Wait, no, I'm confused. No, John Kimmel sang Mustache Ride, which was the sort of Doobie Brothers rock and roll song parody in Saul of the Mole Man, but the theme song was sung by Trey Parker from South Park.
Oh wow.
So I wrote this sort of T-Rex inspired 60s adventure theme song, 60s rock T-Rex thing, and then Trey Parker sang it. So I was pretty thrilled to have a song of mine sung by Trey Parker, and that was the theme song for that. And the reason John Kimmel, who I met because he was also a writer on Crank Yankers, he came to, I had to pay him. Did he pay me or did I pay him? I think he paid me for playing guitar on some track or something, or maybe I had $100 in my pocket to pay him for singing on this one track for Saul of the Mole Men. And it was my last night in LA before I was moving out and going back to Canada. And it's like 2 a.m, and I'm packing up my little garage studio in LA to move back to Canada. And I get held up. I get mugged at gunpoint. A guy comes into my studio and puts a gun to my head, and says, "We're going for a ride in your car. Do you don't want to hear this? This story is taking a left turn. You don't have to hear this whole story if you don't want to." But Crank Yankers always makes me think of that, of John.
I mean, you can.
Well, it's just I ended up going for a ride with a guy with a gun to my head, and the only way I got rid of him was I had that $100 in my pocket that I was going to pay John Kimmel for that song, and so that $100 saved my life that evening, and that guy drove away, and I survived to tell this story. And then I got out of LA the next day, and it was a good way of making me never want to move back to LA, because I literally left with a gun to my head, and it was weird. But
I can imagine. Yeah.
Thanks, Crank Yankers and Saul of the Mole Men, for putting that $100 in my pocket.
Right.
See, it's all part of the rich showbiz. It's been a rich showbiz experience for me. I certainly got the full ride. I think I'm ready to just stay in my basement and occasionally golf.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. Another film you wrote the screenplay for, as I mentioned in your introduction, was An American Werewolf in Paris. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's a similar sob story to the Babysitter Vampire debacle, in that while we were finishing up Freaked, it should be like 1995 or something. No, I guess 1993. Yeah, it was when it was released. We had gotten the job to write the sequel, Tom and I, to because Alex, I think, was on to shooting another movie, and Alex Winter. So Tom and I pitched an idea for American Werewolf in Paris through our agent had gotten the call. And I had the idea that in most werewolf movies, even American Werewolf in London, which I love, is one of my favorite horror movies, because it's one of the few funny horror movies that still it combines horror and comedy as well as anything. It was a big influence on me, and Babysitter Vampire as well. The same, trying to make it still scary but have a sense of humor about it. But the problem with werewolf movies is the hero is usually the werewolf in most older werewolf movies, and that means you have an ending where your hero can't confront the villain because the hero is the villain, and that bugged me. So I was set myself to thinking, is there a way you could write a werewolf story where the hero would actually have somebody to defeat at the end? So I came up with this. I invented some lore. You can just, it's all mythology, so you can invent a new myth. So I invented the myth that if you find the werewolf that bit you, that infected you in the first place, and bite its heart or eat its heart before midnight within, I forget what time period, I think the next full moon was what I came up with. That then that would nullify the curse and you would be saved. So that was the main inspiration. That I think Tom may kill me for this, but I think that was my idea, was to say, is there a way we could have a way that he's not just the only werewolf, and that maybe it's about finding the werewolf that bit you, and if you capture them and kill them, you're saved. So that was a cool hook for a plot. And Tom and I, even on our own dime, and we didn't have much money, and Freaked at that point was dead because we had just shot it. We put everything we had into Freaked, and then the president of the studio who greenlit it got fired, and the new president of the studio hated the movie and told us he was going to kill it and not release it, and it was a waste of time to even finish it. But we were trying to finish it anyway. Tom and Alex had spent a year of their life editing it and trying to save it. So Tom is staying at my place in Toronto at the time, and we're writing American Werewolf. So the deal was, we were told this is going to be a low budget, straight to video, never released in theaters, cheap, low budget movie. And Tom was excited to direct it. He had talked to some of the creature people that worked on Freaked to do designs for cool werewolf transformations and cool ways to visualize the werewolf. And we were going to go to Paris. So without being paid to do it, or without the studio paying us, we, on our own dime, went to Paris for a week and stayed in a really cheap, like, youth hostel on the floor, sleeping on a floor in Paris. But it was still Paris. I'd never been to Paris. I was amazed to find myself in Paris. And it's where I developed my taste for better wine and good coffee, because even in the crappiest place I discovered in Paris, they still drink good coffee. It's beneath them. If you're alive, you're going to have a good croissant, damn it. I don't care what level of crap. You could be sleeping on the floor in the crappiest apartment. You're still going to eat a good croissant in the morning and get a decent cafe au lait. So that was a big step up from the instant coffee in a cup that I was accustomed to before that. So we turned in this script that Tom and I worked so very hard on, and we waited anxiously for the reply to the script we came up with after a week of researching the tunnels. It was all set in the catacombs underneath Paris, and we visited old cemeteries and strange old dilapidated churches and all these cool locations. And the rave scene was big, so we wanted to tie it into the rave scene at the time and have this idea that, well, maybe he thinks he's just having some drug, somebody slipped something in his drink, and he doesn't know if the werewolf stuff's real. He just thinks maybe it's the result of some acid trip he's been on. So that all came together, and we handed it in, and we waited for the feedback. Eventually we got the call. The agent said, I got good news and I got bad news. The good news is the studio loves your script. The studio thinks this is not just a low budget, straight to video thing anymore. They think this could be a major summer release. and they want to go big budget, real movie on this. They love this idea. They think it's great. The bad news is you guys aren't summer movie main release guys, so you're fired. And they're going to hire a new screenwriter to rewrite it, and they're going to hire a big name director to direct it. So that was a big kick in the teeth, especially for Tom, who was really, after what seemed like the failure of Freak, determined to redeem himself with directing Werewolf. And now, because we did such a good job on the script, we've been fired. And he doesn't get to direct it because he's not famous. So we were really, again, I can't even really remember how I felt at the time, other than it was a very weird experience that we, because of WJ rules, would get notifications when a new writer was brought onto the project. And every big name in screenwriting circles was on that list. I think there were like 12 different screenwriters who did a pass on that script, and some pretty big names. We were still the main credited writers because it was our idea and our original script, but it got rewritten so many times. And we didn't even get invited to the premiere of the movie. We didn't even get invited to see the movie. I had to buy my own ticket to go see it when it premiered in Toronto. And I sat there like I was watching somebody else's fever dream of something I had vaguely dictated, because it was like seeing my script had been our script to Tom and I. It was just backwards and stuff we hated. So we didn't really like the finished film at all. And it was especially tough on Tom because he had invested so much time into how he wanted to direct it. So it was a big setback for us, and it made us kind of bitter. And again, the irony of it all being that if we'd done a crappier job on the script, we would have been able to do this direct to video small movie that we were hoping to do. It would have been our movie, but we did too good a job. Just like with Vampire being #1, you think you can't get canceled. Apparently that can backfire, and apparently writing too good a script can backfire. But that's how it happened.
Yeah.
But, other people may like the film. I've heard from people that like that film, and maybe they do. It's just I can't see it with fresh eyes. I can only see the script. I remember what I thought that film should be. So to me,
Right.
it's always it's a joke
Mm-hmm.
tied together. But yeah, but it's a good showbiz story, isn't it?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. Since we're getting close to wrapping up soon, can you share any projects you're currently working on?
And yeah. Just trying to think, because I've had several things in numerous stages of development, non-development. I did a new theme song for a new kids show, a new animated show, about a kind of super powered bunny. It's called Super Buns. And so keep your eyes out for Super Buns. I think that's going to be on Peacock and should be coming out within the next couple months. And I really had fun on that theme song. It was a real blast, very high energy. So I was very thrilled they liked it. And I'm doing music for, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about my wife's project that she's developing with Catherine Winder, who used to work at Lucasfilm and was the one that did Clone Wars. She's on a new project that my wife's working on, and it does involve chickens. That's all I can say. And I'm writing music for it, and I'm just writing some music. There's several composers writing a bunch of stuff, but I've written a few songs for them that I'm looking forward to hearing. And then I've been developing a new series with Nickelodeon for the last 2 years that's been on again and off again, but looks promising right now. I can't say, but I don't think they'd like me saying what it's called because they haven't greenlit it yet. But it's with Nickelodeon UK, so it would probably be a Britain Canada co-production. And it's an idea I had long ago after I read a science article about some weird things involved in quantum physics that have to do with a different aspect of time travel that I've never seen really used in a show. So that's as much as I'm gonna say. It's a vaguely time travel-y show for tweens, and hope it exists. If you see something new on Nickelodeon about a time traveling kid, that's probably me. And but you know, I've written 3 pilot scripts for them now, 3 episodes, and we're supposedly at the yes or no stage. So hopefully after 2 years of back and forth, you know, and it's been a long time during the pandemic, things were very slow. But I'm also at that stage of my career, as I, you know, tell you all these stories, I'm realizing how long I've been at this crazy game. And if I can afford to just, like I say, stay home and write some of my own music and just try and watch younger people, because I don't understand enough about 12-year-olds anymore. I grew up in a pre-computer world. I find it harder to write things for today's audience because they live in a very different world than I grew up in. And it's somebody else's problem to figure that stuff out now. So I'm probably going to do more music. And like I say, maybe I'll do a kids music CD, and then you guys will get a copy of that. Or you can weigh in on what songs should be on it.
Nice.
Tim Burns, greatest
cool.
kid.
Definitely. So
Nice.
So, are there any words you'd like to say to those who have supported and followed your career?
Thanks. Apologies. Apologies for the apologies for all the stuff that didn't quite work, but you know, I am always very grateful that I think when I look back at how many things happened to me in my 20s, mostly on the heels of the Henson Hour, and because the Henson Hour introduced me to Tom Stern, and we became such good friends and did all these fun things together, introduced me to Mitchell Kriegman, got me to New York. So many of these things dominoed from that. And there's a lot, that's to me a big lesson forever, is like, you got to take chances. You got to go do stuff that seems fun. I've always been in it for fun, do what seems fun and makes me laugh. And hopefully it makes somebody else laugh, or what tune seems catchy to me hopefully seems catchy to somebody else. But you, as much as you want to please an audience, I think you've got to be your own audience and do the stuff that inspires you. And the people that inspired me, like Jim and Jerry Jewell, always seem to have that spark, that they made themselves laugh and they had fun doing it. And if you had the funny, that funny wins. So stick with that, and the rest will sort itself out. You know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. People would like to connect with you. Where can people find you?
Oh, probably in a dumpster somewhere. Wait, what time of day are we talking? You know, I'm on Facebook. There's a Freaked page that, like I say, is growing in interest. And I guess I probably shouldn't hand out my personal email on the internet. So I still can't get over the fact that there's people who know who I am yet. Like, it's been a bit of a snowball. I'm always happy being in the background, but you just look for me on through Freaked or whatever else, and I'm playing music. I have a good friend named Peter Wildman, who's a comedy guy who was in a great comedy troupe from Canada named The Frantics. And I'm playing music with him on September 22nd in Toronto at the SoCap Theater. I'll be doing an evening of comedy songs with him. And he's got CDs and albums, most that I've produced and we've recorded here. So check out Peter Wildman if you don't know about him. And keep your ears tuned for Tim Burns music coming in the future.
Definitely. Links to those will be in the description for people to connect. So the last question that Jake's about to ask is a question we ask all of our guests at the end of each interview. Go ahead, Jake.
Thank you, Chris. So, of course, you know, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia. Yeah, look at that. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? Or in your own words, how would you define the word nostalgia?
I do think of a famous quote from a comedian whose name eludes me, who said nostalgia is another word for brain death. And I disagree with that, because I like nostalgia. I like the old things. And my version of nostalgia is I think of my first childhood memories of shows that excited me. And for me, it was the Batman show. I used to watch Batman series with my dad. And I knew it was one of the first shows I used to watch because I couldn't read yet. And he would have to read the comic book sound effects that would come up in the fight scenes. And I can still remember his voice saying, pow, biff, kazam, klabow. So when I was in a punk band years later and I needed a nickname, I chose Biff. And I was Biff Burns for several years.
I like that, yeah.
And that was sort of call back to the Batman sound effects because it reminded me of my dad.
Nice. Great word send off.
That's great.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Great words.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview on our podcast. This is a blast.
Yes, it was.
Yes, and thank you
for
for
happen much. I'm just shocked anybody out there's I'm always just trying to get the stuff off my desk and I forget that there's people who actually watch it and enjoy it. So it's really heartening to me to see that you guys really enjoyed this stuff and paid attention and
appreciate that.
Appreciate it a lot.
It means a lot, and thank you very much. For what you've done over the years. For what you've done is it's been part of our lives for so long, especially Sprout, and keep up the great work. And cannot wait what's next for you, Miss down the line, especially with the future projects you'll be working on. They can talk about later
eventually.
So
good.
Yes, and I actually saw what your wife has done. That's awesome. She worked Let's Go Show, Chica Show, News World, Wiggly Waffle, Preschool Musical, lots of other things. But
yes,
we all met in school at Ryerson. Used to be the radio and television course I took. We were classmates there, and
cool.
Together ever since.
Nice.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day, Tim. We'll let you know when this goes up.
Yes.
Yep. Super.
Absolutely.
Edit out the dumb bits if you can. Make me look semi-intelligent. I beg you.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your day, Tim.
Have a good rest of your day, Tim. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
You too.
You too.
Take care, Tim.
Bye, Tim.
And it's goodbye from us as well. We absolutely enjoy our time with amazing Tim Burns, and oh my gosh.
Yes, again, as Jake said, grew up with his work from Sprout. But yes, keep on the lookout for more wonderful interviews. And to close this out, what do we say, Jake?
Keep nostalgia alive. Take care, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show interview. Be sure to follow Jake and the crew on social media and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.